Welcome to Centerville, a game published by GMT and designed by Chad Jensen, a very interesting, very eclectic designer. A designer of war games, but it also branched out of that genre and gave us very different types of designs. A couple of years ago, he designed Urban Sprawl, which is a game of urban development. I almost would say a game of urban development for war gamers, because there were many levels of complexity, which is what you often find in war games, but especially there was a considerable random element, which is more what you expect from a war game, where you want randomness to represent unpredictable outcomes of battle, and not so much what you expect from, say, Euro games that have to do with investing and building buildings and buying houses, etc., etc. Welcome to Centerville. It has similarities with Urban Sprawl in that sense, because it is again a game of urban development with a considered random element. In Urban Sprawl, cards provided that random element. Here it is dice. In fact, the game is a hybrid between a board game and a dice game. I really can't place it in one category or the other. In dice games, dice are what matters the most. Sometimes you have a board maybe to keep track of a couple of things, but the dice are the thing. On a board game, the spatial organization of the components on the board is what matters more than anything. And here it also matters a lot. So you really have these two foci around which the whole design revolves, but still there is a considered random element, because what you can do, what you get, is based on rolling the dice. It's a classic idea. You roll and then you can re-roll once and re-roll potentially twice, and then you use the results to do stuff on the board. What you're trying to do with the resources created by the dice is to gain wealth and prestige in the city or town of Centerville. It seems like you're this ambitious person that wants to run for political offices and develop places around town and develop the green belt around town, and also achieve and acquire an education in a lot of different fields, and gain status here and do a ton of other stuff. That's either some multitasking or somebody in the real life, I don't know, probably would need some medication, like narrow your objectives, DG. But you're very ambitious. You want to do them all. Or maybe you want to do a couple of these things, but you want to do the ones that will give you a lot of points. So, a lot of options, a lot of different paths to victory, as you will see when I show the game in more detail. Actually, why don't we do just that? Let's take a closer look at Welcome to Centerville and how the game works. The board of the game shows a general actual representation of Centerville, of the town where you're building stuff and trying to gain wealth and prestige. There's also an area where you can build stuff here along the river, and then you have more abstract sections of the map indicating resources that you can acquire and places where you will place your cubes to indicate your status, your influence, your political offices, and stuff like that. Now, the engine of the game is a known one. It is roll dice up to 3 times, roll once, reroll up to twice, choose what to keep and what to reroll each time, and at the end you use the icons that you have at the end of your roll/rerolls to perform actions on the board. The only exception to the reroll option is hourglass symbols. So the hourglass symbols cannot be rerolled, but then when you get to use your icons, at least it'll give you a little consolation prize. Also, there is a track here on this side of the board, which is the time track. For each hourglass that is rolled, you move that marker there by 1. When the marker goes all the way down here to the bottom of the time track, the first round is over and you have a scoring phase. Then you repeat, second round and second scoring phase, then third round and last scoring phase. And at that point the game is over, and the player that has performed better than anybody else is the winner. How do you measure that performance? Easy, by tracking 2 types of resources that you're accumulating during the game: prestige and wealth. And you need to keep an eye on both, because at the end of the game you will only score the resource of which you have the least. So if I have 38 prestige and 42 wealth, well, I'm scoring 38 victory points at the end of the game, which is nice because, again, you cannot neglect one in favor of the other one entirely. So now let's talk about the actions that you can perform and the things that they allow you to do. There are symbols on these dice here that represent contracts. Contracts are used to build buildings in town, that is, to place these cubes in these spaces in town. Now, the town has a park in the middle, but you cannot use the contracts to build it there. And then it is divided in four areas, I should say 4 ranges. It's 4 districts, and each district is divided in 4 ranges that are marked with 1, 2, 3, and 4. The higher the number, the more valuable the building. So a building here is worth 1, a building here is worth 3. You use contrast symbols, which are these symbols here, to build in these areas here. You can pretty much gain a point here for each contract that you use. For example, here I could place a building in a 3 area because I'm using 3 contracts, but you have to build in an area of which you have at least a building, at least a contract. So with these 3 dice, I could build in the 3 area here, because I have red, or in the 3 area here, or in the 3 area here, not in the yellow one because that's what I'm missing. So contracts can be turned into points to build buildings only if you have at least a contract to represent the area in which you are building. And this is a very abstract representation because later there are options of upgrading your buildings and you simply move them. So that doesn't really mean where they are, but simply how much they are worth. That's for the contracts. Other symbols, the benches. Benches, where are they? Benches. You need 3 bench symbols, 3 bench symbols to build a bench in the park. And so you place a cube there when you're able to do so. And then later, when you spend a bench, you gain 1 status equal to the number of benches that you have in the park. Status is a situation, is a trait that you track here. The status is best here and worst here, so there's a player with the highest status, next, and lowest status. And during the game, players will use game effects to climb up the social ladder. Hey, my benches are better than yours, and now I have the highest status of them all. Mwahahaha. When, because of a game effect, you lose the status of first player, you lose first status, you gain 1 of these tokens, which are favorite tokens, which can be used to perform special actions. So gaining first status is always good, even if you think you're going to lose it soon, because then at least you get a favorite token. And those favorite tokens can be really neat. So benches will give you status and also will actually increase the value of your buildings in town later during scoring. Trees. Oh, trees are interesting. Trees, you can spend trees to advance your marker on the green belt track. For each tree that you spend, you advance there. And the number that you're occupying in green belt track indicates the value of your properties along the river. But then, of course, you need to spend resources to build there. With 3 trees, as you can see there, you can place a building in an empty space along the river. It takes a favor token to be able to build on the bridge. Again, we'll see what these things do later, but the idea is that you are trying to score points and to set the situation that will allow you to score points at the end of the turn, at the end of the round, during the scoring phase. Here we have the political area of the board, and you place cubes there by using votes. By using a certain number of votes, you need to place a number of cubes equal to those votes on any one of these boxes. If the box is empty, you need to place at least 2. If there already are cubes there. Then you need to outcube the opponent or to outvote the opponent, and so you need to place at least one more than they have. By having cubes in one of these boxes, you are taking control of one of the political offices in town, and then you gain certain advantages. If you're the mayor, you advance in status, as indicated by that symbol there. When you become the urban planning master, you gain another turn. If you have control of the police and fire department, you get to be protected from disasters. There are tokens on the board that represent disasters. They're placed there at the beginning of the game. In certain circumstances, they'll be picked up from the board and dumped in a bag, and later there will be tokens that are drawn from the bag. And when a disaster comes, there will be negative effects for all the players, for every player, but for the player that has control of the police and fire. So the police and fire department helps you against the disasters. The public works allow you to upgrade one of your buildings. The control of the finances, when you take control of that box, you gain wealth equal to the value of your best building. And similarly, city council, when you take control of that, you gain prestige equal to the value of your best building. By the way, I don't think I mentioned this. Speaking of best buildings, the best buildings in town are the ones in the area, number 4, that you do not build using contracts, but you use building tree symbols. There's a lot of stuff that the trees are for. What else? Vocations, or just say maybe education, specialization, evening school, secondary degrees that you take later in life, stuff that you learn. There's a track here where you will place these vocation tokens that are drawn randomly from this bag here, and there's also the bag where you place the disaster tokens when there's an effect that removes them from the board. When vocations are taken from this track, then they are replaced. Now, vocations have numbers there, and the numbers are placed in sequential order from lowest to highest. However, the lowest values are more valuable because they are rarer. So there is less tourism knowledge floating around than there is about health or the arts or retail, for example. To gain vocations, you spend these symbols here, but with a single symbol, then you get to take that one, see next to that one. With 2, you get a choice of either of the ones in this area. With 3, you get a choice of any of these 3, so you have better choices, meaning a better range, and also you have the more valuable ones. Because when tokens are acquired and later they are replaced at the end of the turn, you need to adjust the track so that the lowest ones always remain there. So if there is going to be some valuable one that comes out, it'll come out at the bottom, not at the top. For example, if this one has been acquired and this one is drawn from the bag, then that's what's going to happen. It will take 3 hats, 3 little magic hats of wisdom to acquire it. Hourglasses, we already mentioned. All that they do is to advance the time and to give you a small advantage, such as to gain a point of status or a point of wealth or a point of prestige. There's also another symbol, which is this one, fate. It allows you to copy any other result. So for example, extra education, extra votes, extra trees, or extra benches, and so on and so forth. Pretty much, these are the things that you can do. Actually, there are a couple of more things, extra stuff, like if you take, with 4 hats, you can take control of the media. They give you 4th reroll when you're rolling dice. So there are a couple of other things that you can acquire in special circumstances, but these are the general things that you can do. Build here, increase the value of your terrain here, gain education, increase your status, run for office. It's a lot to take in, a lot of stuff to take into account. And all of this would be for nothing if we didn't have scoring. So sit tight, be comfortable, because this is not the easiest scoring. It has several steps, and well, a lot of things to score, because as you can see, there are a lot of things that you can do. First, you score. Each cube in the park will give the value of +1 in each of the 4 zones, and then for each zone, you calculate to see who is the player that has the most value and which is the player that has the least value. If you have no presence in an area, by the way, the value is 0. The player with majority in the yellow area and in the blue area will gain 6 money, and in the areas, the player with the least in the yellow area and the player with the least in the blue area will lose 3 money. The same applies for red and yellow. Highest presence here 6, highest presence 6 here, lowest -3, lowest -3, but this time the currency that is affected is prestige, not money. The river. Each river space that you occupy north of the bridge gains you wealth equal to your position in the green belt track. So I am north of the river, I have a building there, my position is 3, so I just gained 3 wealth. Buildings on the south side of the river, there is south of that bridge, same thing, but with prestige. So each building gives you as much prestige as the value of your position in the green belt track. The bridge, if you have a block on the bridge and you control it, then you gain wealth and prestige. Villas, after you're done scoring these buildings, you shift them along these little cute roads here to park them in these areas here that represent villas, and they will allow you to score at the end of the game. At the end of the game, villas in this column here will be worth 1, these ones will be worth 2, and these ones will be worth 4. Next up, what do we score next? We score the offices. You score wealth and prestige based on the number of political offices that you control, following this thing here. And again, even 0 again is bad, there are penalties. Which is why you don't start with 0 wealth and status. You start with more, so you can lose them at the end of the first scoring phase. Status, score wealth and prestige based on your position on the status track, and also which side of your status marker is face up. Yes, there is an effect during the game that will allow you to flip your marker to this other side that has 2 stars, and then simply all it does, it makes the payoff of the status scoring higher, as you can see. If you had 2 stars, you score this side here, and if otherwise you score on this side here. Then after you're done scoring this thing, you reset the situation, and then of course we have also more scoring at the end of the game. More scoring at the end of the game. The vocations. You score vocations for sets of the same and set of different. So actually the non-valuable ones, so the ones that are very common, is very easy to make a big set of them, and they will score you wealth. But the ones that are rare are needed to make big sets of different vocations. And pretty much then you use this table here. For your biggest set of different vocations, you get to score these points here based on how many vocations you have. Say I have 5 different vocations, then I score 10 points. But then I also have 4 vocations that are the same, and then I score 10 because of that. The villas will score at the end based on the column they occupy. Finally, legacy. Legacy tokens are given to the players at the beginning of the game. They're kept secret, and they are revealed at the end of the game to reveal other things, extra things that will score at the end of the game, that will give points to the player that has the most in the category and the least, and it will give a penalty to the player that has the least. Score all points at the end of each round. Do the final scoring with these extra phases, such as the villas, at the end of the 3rd round. And at the point, the player that has the best, lowest of prestige and wealth is the winner of the game. That is, Each player scores the lowest that they have between wealth and prestige, and the player with the highest score is the winner of the game. I like it. It's a good game. I find it to be well designed, a solid design, and I like the fact that there are just so many things that you can do. Yes, there is randomness, tons of it, but I didn't find that it was the kind of randomness that puts a player to a disadvantage when compared to the other. I always roll high and I get a lot of stuff. You always roll low and you don't get anything. Or we're playing Catan. I keep rolling my numbers, or everybody keeps rolling my numbers, and I keep getting sheep and ore and wood, and I trade it with everybody, and you never get your resources, and you're stuck there, and there isn't much that you can do. Here there is randomness, but it's not the type of randomness that tells you whether or not you're getting something, but tells you which of a certain range of options you're going to be able to exploit. So pretty much it decides what you're going to do, not whether or not you're going to do something. And of course, with one or two rerolls, then you have some saying in that, or at least a chance of saying something. That is to say, there wasn't a turn in which I couldn't do anything, or I felt I just wasted my turn. There were times where I wanted to do a certain things. I wanted to do one or two things. After the first roll, I'm like, yeah, that's not gonna work, and so I decided to adjust my plans on the fly and to achieve something else, to try to use my rerolls to focus on something else that wasn't maybe what I had originally planned, but maybe in the long run turned out to be okay. So as long as you're flexible with your plans, then there is always something you can do. And since there are so many paths to victory, there are so many different ways of adjusting your strategy as you go. I found that to be interesting, to be an interesting challenge. I didn't mind the fact that sometimes the dice seem to dictate what I would do. And of course, there are other times in which I really need that extra, the final vocation to complete a really mighty set that will score me a boatload of points at the end. Then yes, even if my first roll wasn't all that great, I'm gonna re-roll everything and really try to get something, although my initial roll didn't seem to be very promising in that direction. So you even had that choice here. You can push my luck a lot, or kind of like go with the flow and then maximize things accordingly. Because you can build in town, you can become the chief of police, you can become the mayor, you can become the greenbelt developer, you can become this sort of like very wise person that knows everything about a lot of different disciplines, or a ton about this one discipline. Lots of points there. So I really like the fact that, again, you can collect points in so many different ways. However, there are also some negatives that to me prevent this game from being more than, say, good. The potential to me was like, wow, this is going to be great. I enjoyed the game, but again, I wouldn't say, I didn't find it much more than good, much better than good. One of the reasons is that on one hand, yay, great, there's so many paths to victory. On the other hand, these paths feel pretty disjointed from one another. They are very different. In one case, you are just numerically adjusting, getting more votes than an opponent. In another area of the board, you have to take into account the spatial organization of the cubes, and how many cubes are in one area and how many are in another area. When it comes to the river, that is great, but I'm placing my cube there, but I also want to see if then the cube is going to pay off in terms of the villa that I get, and I spend a lot of time and attention doing that, and I forget that actually the value of my property on the river is tied to my greenbelt thing. So I'm like, oh gosh, I have all these properties that are worth nothing because I didn't invest much there. I invest out on the greenbelt, and then I forget to do that other thing. Or I forget or I neglect to do the the votes, etc., etc. It just feels like almost like several mini games going on at the same time, and as you switch from one to the other, you may feel a little bit dispersive, and you do need to do that because you need to be good at almost everything and excellent in a couple of places to win. You need to take into account what you're doing now, and you need to take into account the final scoring, because there are some big points to be scored there. So actually it's very easy to lose the game if you're just ahead of the first two scorings and you're like you have a considerable advantage, but somebody else has been has been staying a little bit behind, investing more in building long time sets of resources that will score a lot in the end, and then the person jumps ahead in the final score. That may feel a little anticlimactic. It's great that you don't have the runaway leader problem, but also sometimes I thought I was the runaway leader problem, and I wasn't. There was the leader, the mega comeback. Sometimes it feels so sudden that, again, it almost feels anticlimactic. So there is the fact that gameplay feels a little bit dispersive just because there are so many different things to take into account. However, the thing that to me reduced my enjoyment of the game is downtime. I had a problem with downtime, and if you watch my video, you know that usually when I talk about downtime, I blame not the game, but the players. I just say stuff like, well, play with somebody else, with people that don't give you downtime, that do not produce downtime. But it is true, on the other hand, that there are designs that somewhat encourage that. In which case, alas, producing downtime, being the downtime player, is more understandable. And this is a game that does this, at least that's the effect it had in my group. You do not have really anything to do during other people's turns. The game is for 2 to 4 players, but when you're playing with 2 players, you have to use bots, and you know that means that the game was not designed for that number of players to start with. So 3 or 4, and to me, ideally 4. But on the other side, on the other hand, when you play with 4, then it means that you're playing 25% of the game. Yes, the next player is going, and I want to see if they place a certain cube there, and then you go, and I want to see if that alters my majority. I had majority in a certain district. I want to see if now you're getting majority because you moved a cube and another player placed another cube and another player replaced a cube. But if I do that, it's not all that fun. It's just homework. It's just I feel like I'm just taking down numbers. So that doesn't really affect me in any way. There isn't any way that I can use to stop you from getting a bench in the park or from building on the river. So even if I pay attention, it's a lot of homework that doesn't really do much to improve my position or my chance of making good decisions. Even if I think of something else and then the game goes back to me, I just look at the board and get a certain sense. Actually, in a certain sense, you should not obsess about having a perfect knowledge of everything, because again, I like to build a contract, then I get a roll and I get a lot of votes, so I can just throw them all away to try to get the contracts or go for political offices. Then at that point, I pay attention to what is happening in the political side, and I see, wow, look at that, then here and here. So in a certain sense, the game almost makes it unnecessary to pay attention to what the players are doing. In a certain sense, almost disincentivizes it, because it is better, it's more effective to just go where the first roll kind of like encourages you to go. With the exception of, some cases, again, where you're building some really long-term structures. And it's very possible, it's very normal, and in fact, it's very understandable. Again, the players will feel a little bit overwhelmed because the scoring has so many layers to it, so many moving parts. The players, when they're rolling the dice, they really want to make the best out of what they can get. They're calculating what they can get, what could be useful for them to get, how many chances they have to place a good cube in a certain district, and then actually they will look at the district and there's a bunch of cubes there, and then they'll start counting how many points each player has to see if they still have majority or if they almost have majority and so it's worth to build there, or if actually they're behind to the point like, okay, I won't have majority there, whatever. So the fact that the districts will look kind of busy starting from the middle of the game on, and so players will constantly count and recount how many points they have, not super fun. So between the dice that you have, figuring out who has majority or might have majority in the districts, and trying to score in so many different categories, there's a lot to think about it. This is one of the few cases in which you will hear me being sympathetic with the downtime players. I may even be one of them if we ever play this game together. And so try to understand me and be patient, because that is in the nature of the game. I think that this game kind of like leads to that. At least again, that was happened in my group. And that diminished my enjoyment of the game. It prevented me from being constantly connected with the game, to really be involved with the design. I was involved in my turn, and then my mind started wandering, and that is not really ideal. So welcome to Centerville. More meat than you would have in Yahtzee and in so many other dice games that are based on the roll once and then re-roll once or twice. Almost too much, maybe too much meat on such a small skeleton, because again, the core idea is that one, roll and re-roll, but then you have so many different places to go with those dice and so many different things to go. They're so different from one another. They result in so many pieces of information to analyze. Then again, it almost feels to me that the original idea, which is so simple, so intuitive, so immediate, it kind of like gets lost in all of the crunching numbers that you're doing. Is you're checking the majorities and you're trying to see if your investment will pay off in this or in that category, etc., etc. So I like dice games. I like dice games where you roll and re-roll and you generate effects. But usually the ones that I play and that I enjoy tend to be lighter. I don't mind the heavy, meaty Euro games or games of urban development. For example, I did enjoy Urban Sprawl, but in a sense, those are, well, they have the bones, they have the depth to sustain that engine. Here, it feels like a strange tension between something super simple, super immediate, and then a lot of homework that you have to do. And I didn't find that the two layers really coalesced very well. I don't want to sound too negative. I still enjoyed it. I don't know that I will feel like playing it very often in the future, when there are different options for dice games and for games of urban development that I find more enjoyable. Here, I found that there are just too many disconnected parts and there's too much downtime for me to really find this game excellent. I find it enjoyable, but not much more than that. Not super exciting, not exceptional in terms of quality or of how compelling the game was. Welcome to Centerville, Yahtzee with a theme, with a city, and a lot of things to analyze.